So good morning. Welcome to our Staff Council Open Forum. I'm so glad that you all were able to make it out today. I'm John Cook. I'm the current chair for Staff Council, and we were really glad to be able to host these open forums. The last one, which we had last month, was really well attended, had a lot of great interactions and dialogue, which prompted a request to have another one right away. So we set this one up and appreciate you all coming out. And just to kind of give you some format on today's open forum, we will be having a number of questions that have been submitted. We'll be addressing those. If you have questions or follow-up questions to any of the ones that have been submitted, fill those out. We've got paper and pens are on the back buffets, or if you happen to have your own, turn those in. We'll have our moderator who will be compiling those and handing them up here. We'll only be accepting written questions for the first portion of the format, and we'll have an open mic for the last 30 minutes or so. So any questions that you have, please submit those in writing so we can compile those and make sure. We will have a cutoff point as well to make sure we get through all the questions that had been submitted before the end of the forum. And we are so glad today to have both Chancellor Maples and Vice Chancellor Plain here to answer these questions. And again, we're looking forward to having your interaction and dialogue. Please feel free to submit those questions. Our council members are here. We'll be able to collect those and we'll get started. Thank you again.
Happy to be here. This is cool. Thanks for doing this. Okay, so how many people are online? 37. 37. Very cool. I knew it was filling up quickly. That's very cool.
And we will be recording and submitting this, so anybody that can't see it, we'll be able to get to that later on from our new website, which was launched yesterday. So to get started, we have staff of, one of the first concerns that was submitted, and actually as a follow-up from last time, was the eye care benefit and health benefits question. We did receive a response from System regarding that, and I was going to read the responses to both of those questions. And the first one for eye care benefit, the response to that concerning providers here in Rolla, it can be difficult and challenging when the university changes healthcare carriers. Each carrier is different and offers unique features that may not mirror exactly to the previous carrier. We carefully review each carrier during the RFP process and try to make the best decision for the entire university system prior to changing health carriers. We have to assure Missouri S&T employees and their dependents that IMED is currently recruiting additional providers in Rolla to be an in-network provider. If, however, additional providers are not recruited into the IMED network by the end of April, IMED will develop a plan to process out-of-network claims as in-network. If the later solution is implemented, additional details will be forthcoming. We understand this has caused an inconvenience for employees seeking eye care or vision care in the Rolla area, but we are working towards a solution. If you do have additional concerns or things that come up from that, please feel free to submit that to Staff Council, and we'll be glad to forward that on to the appropriate group up in Columbia.
So that would be a week from now?
Yes.
The end of April.
End of April.
Okay.
So more details will be coming. And in terms of the confusion with labs and what is in network, PCRMC and Mercy are in network both as a provider and for lab work. LabCorp has a facility nearby in Salem and in Sullivan, Missouri. It will be helpful to have specific claim information in order to research and identify where the breakdown is happening. Obtaining lab work and getting results should not be complicated or cumbersome. To expedite a solution to this issue, it will be helpful to have specific member information who have experienced difficulty in ordering or receiving lab results. So if there is a breakdown in any of that, again, feel free to contact us with the specifics and we'll be glad to forward those on to help facilitate the dialogue. Yes.
Did they give the contact information or the specific people from you in the case of medical information?
And we'll also be working with HR to get that contact information out there. But yes, then you can we'll try to make that so it's a little bit more direct and don't have as many levels to get you through that if you have those questions or concerns.
And that will be contacts with System HR because they are the ones who work directly with the medical providers.
And we've had a number of other ones that were submitted through our online. We have a new website up, as I mentioned, which we will be getting a Qualtrics form on there that you can submit directly, or feel free to email anytime if you have questions or concerns that you'd like brought up at forum or in our advocacy meetings. It is MST Staff Council AD at mst.edu is the new email specifically for the Advocacy Committee. And the first question that we'd received was, staff have heard numerous proposals for consolidation, centralization, program and degree cancellations, total reward benefits restructurings, etc. But very little to none on how staff reductions other than a statement that layoffs will happen. My questions are there numbers to be laid off? Will there just be layoffs, or will there be incentives to leave early or combinations? Will there be will the decisions be made by department or division? Will the transition assistance program be renewed? It is scheduled to expire this fiscal year. Will folks who opt to stay until age 60 achieve the subsidy university insurance to be excluded from the layoff pool? I'd like to think the greatest asset for the university is its people. Why has this issue been glossed over or ignored? People need to know that a huge change in life is coming so plans can be taken. I know it's a loaded question.
I think there was a whole bunch of questions rolled into that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I will try to take a stab at kind of a general answer, and then John can follow up with the pieces that I didn't touch on. How'll that be? Okay. So the first thing that I would say is that at this point, with all of the things that are going on across the university, there are initiatives being led by the Board of Curators, there are initiatives being led by the system, and then there are strategic planning decisions being done by the campus. And on top of that, we have a $5 million budget deficit. So with all of those initiatives, I would say everything is on the table. With regard to specific decisions that have been made, the decisions that have been specifically made and where those employees have been identified as part of a strategic plan or strategic realignment, those employees have been notified and those announcements have been made public. There are other things that are being evaluated, but no other decisions have been made at this time. We respect the fact that we are 75% of what we do from a dollar perspective is people. If you look at just the people impact really on the institution, it's much higher than 75%. And so we owe our first loyalty to those people who are directly involved in any of those areas. So once a decision has been made, then it will be expedited as quickly as possible. Those people will be notified. And then once those people have been notified, then the rest of campus will be notified. What we absolutely do not want to do, and what we think is not fair to our people, is for anyone to find out by the rumor mill that something is going to happen. And so we will try very, very hard to not let that happen. With regard to at what level will decisions be made? Decisions will be made at all levels. Some of them will be made at the department level as part of budget cuts, or as part of strategic redirection or refocusing of priorities. Some of them will be made at the division level. Some of them may be made at the campus level. Will there be incentives to leave or early retirement things? I don't know. At this point, I can tell you by looking at the retirement plan, of which I've been in a long time, so I kind of watch those things. The retirement plan is underfunded, not overfunded. Now, compared nationally, we are in an excellent place from a funding perspective of our retirement plan. We've worked very, very hard as an institution to always be very diligent and make sure that we make the contributions that are needed to protect the interests of our employees. So at the same time, we're not overfunded. Many of you may have been around long enough, or you may have heard stories from people who have been around long enough, because 15 years ago, maybe more, there were some early retirement incentives. We've done 2 in the last 35 years, probably done 2 in our whole history, but they came about 3 years apart. At that time, it was a very different fiscal situation from where we are today. At that time, our retirement plan was overfunded. And one of the things that they were looking at is, did they refund contributions? And remember also at that time, employees did not contribute to the plan. So at that time we were looking at, we were overfunded. The markets had been very, very positive in its place. And so it was decided that they would do an early retirement incentive and allow people to go ahead and take advantage. And they burned up basically the overfunding of the plan. And then about 5 or 6 years later, we had the Great Recession of 2008, and we lost a huge amount of the value in the retirement plan. And so we've been digging our way out ever since. So because of those economic dynamics, I would seriously doubt that an early retirement incentive plan would be offered to staff or faculty from that perspective. That is not to say that at some point, some type of a retirement plan for faculty might not be offered. There have been discussions. There was one done at Mizzou a couple of 3 years ago. But that was a very different thing in that plan, everyone who was eligible for that plan was already eligible for full retirement under the retirement plan. And what that incentive was basically faculty could sell their tenure. So they were already eligible to retire. And so what the incentive was really a property rights buyout. So something like that may occur. We have many faculty on campus who are well past full retirement eligibility in our plan. I don't know about that. That would have to be something that would be part of not just a budgetary plan, but it would be part of a strategic program evaluation plan. And at this point in time, the deans have not come forward with such a plan. And since they would have to be the ones who would initiate such a plan, I'm not aware of it. Does that?
Mm-hmm.
No. I think the one other question, which John's right, that was a really loaded question. So for those people who chose not to retire by December 31st of last year, I'm one of those, by the way. Unless we work until age 60, we will have no retirement benefits. All of us were counseled about the risk that we were taking, whether we continued to work or whether we retired. One of the largest risks for those of us in that group was, what if my position is eliminated or I'm fired? And so I think there were some pretty plain conversations. I know that they had pretty plain conversations with me about those things. So no, if a person is in that, I can't remember, B category, can somebody help me? Is it the B category? I'm assuming those are the people that are at, if you're in the B category and your position is eliminated, then you would have, I believe, and I'd have to double check this, I don't know if Rhonda's here or not, but the time while you're still in layoff, there's still layoff status, there's TAP, transition assistance. If you get another job on campus during that period of time, then you would, be considered continued. But if you are laid off and you do not get another job, benefit eligible job on campus, then there would be no special treatment.
When you did bring up the transition assistance program, there was a question on that being renewed since it does end at the end of this fiscal year.
I have not heard anyone discuss the fact that it would not go back to the board for renewal. It's been on an annual renewal for about 10 or 15 years. And so I've not heard anything from anyone saying that they're not planning to take that back for renewal. I have heard discussions whether they might tweak the plan. So the question would be, will the plan be better or worse going forward? I don't know, because I've not heard what the tweaks are that they're, but I think they are running some different kinds of numbers to see. So I don't know exactly what's going to be going forward. I believe the current plan expires August 31st.
June 30, it's the fiscal year.
It ends with the fiscal year. Maybe the non-tenure track NTT plan expires August 31st. So that I've been told that that is on the agenda for the board in June.
Mhm.
Now, so exactly what that looks like, we don't know yet. Whether the board is going to vote to approve it or not, we don't know either. But I've been told that it will be on the board docket for approval in June, but that's all I know about that. Yes, ma'am.
Can we ask clarifying questions related to that one, or do we need to write it down? I'll be happy to write it down. I'm just wondering what the 5 million is. Are we up in the whole this year, or is that for next year?
So for the 5
Just to
million budget
reiterate, I'm
cut,
going to clarify the question so that those on Zoom can also hear it. So the question was, is the 5 million in the hole for this year, or is that projection for next year?
so the $5 million budget cut, that is what our planning numbers are for FY19. Now, that is the net after we add our revenue increases, our revenue decreases due to what we anticipate from state appropriations. All of the changes are mandatories, and that also includes over $2 million in there, about a little less than $2.5 million for a 2% merit pool for faculty and staff, an increase in the flat benefit rate due to increase in medical care cost, an increase for post-tenure review for faculty and for promotion and tenure for faculty. So all of those things, which are close to $2.5 million, the estimated cost of those things, are part of that package. So if we add up all of the revenue increases that we anticipate, the cost increases that we anticipate, the cost of investing in our staff at that level, the net that we have to find for 19 is 5 million. And that's the same number that we've been working with through the spring. Now, we hope and are very encouraged by what's coming out of Jefferson City with regard to state appropriations. That's very exciting, and we're very thankful about that. However, I will tell you that our current governor has said that his recommendation was his recommendation, and he has the full authority to withhold or to veto. He can veto line items, he can withhold any amount at any time on that. So even if the legislature gives us that in our base, the odds of us actually receiving that additional money in this fiscal year are pretty low. Therefore, we will continue to plan conservatively. If we are actually get to receive that money, we will have a list of one-time investments that the institution needs to make, and we will use that money in 19 for those one-time investments, and then we'll have that in our base for going forward. So that will help us with future things. So even if we don't actually collect the money in this fiscal year, it's still a really positive thing to have that in our appropriation. So it bodes well for the future. Another thing that, if I can stretch this out just a little bit, one of the things that's going on at the curator level that we've been asked to do is when we present our budget in June for FY19, we've also been asked to present a 5-year plan. So many people in the past have said, well, we'll just get past this year and then things will be better. And so we tend to look at this just as a year-by-year thing. And so what we're trying to do is look at this from a longer term perspective and be very strategic in our cuts and be very strategic in our investments so that we can look at how can we invest money today that will have a return for the future, and that even though we would anticipate, given the funding situation our state is in, that we would not see growing state appropriations over time, even a lessening of the cuts can have a real impact over that longer 5-year period. The other thing is actions that we take today that are long-term in nature as opposed to just being very short-term focused can pay real dividends over that long-term impact. And one of the things that's in that long-term plan is a merit pool going up. So if we build in a merit pool for each of those 5 years, and we build in our estimated decline in state appropriation based upon the fiscal health of our state, there's a deficit. So what we have to figure out is, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to generate additional revenue? How are we going to leverage the resources that we have in a better way, more strategically, so that we don't have to cut every year, but that we can make some changes strategically on the front end of that 5-year period, make some investments that will pay dividends down the line, then that we can put ourselves on a much more sustainable, gradual growth period instead of a gradual just cutting. So that's the goal. And that's why everything doesn't just happen really fast, because it means that we have to truly evaluate every plan that comes forward. We have to look at everything and say, is this a short-term fix, or is this a longer-term action that's strategic, that can pay dividends down the road? So we'll be looking again for 19 to solve our 19 budget issues. Over the next year, there's going to be many initiatives, many evaluations, many questions about how can we do things differently that will position us to be in a better place 5 years from now. And so those kinds of things are not all going to happen. You know, everything's not all going to be decided, and then we put this budget into place and we're good until next spring, and then we do this all over again. No, it's going to be a continual process throughout the next year or more, just to try to figure out not only what do we want to be in 5 years from a strategic academic perspective with our 5-year plan, but two, how are we going to fund it so that we can actually make progress on that plan.
And I'll add, this is not just cut, because this actually is strategic reinvestment. The merit pool is a strategic reinvestment. And I would tell you the university's most valuable and important resource is people. And so that has to occur over this next period of years. And we have to figure out how to redirect, reinvest, and help. So we're actually open to ideas that you can have about, what is it that, if I'm sitting here thinking, what can I do? What can I do to help? Is it short term? Is it long term? What can we do specifically? Any of the ideas you might have along these lines, we would welcome. We would welcome a chance to look at them and welcome a chance to evaluate them and think about it. What can you do yourself to help the university move forward? Historically, every time we've had these decreases in funding from the state of Missouri since the time of the formation of the system, it has been on the heels of some kind of a recession. This is the first time ever that we've had a 3-year run of decreased funding and there's no recession. And there are a lot of economists who claim that there's a recession still geared up to come our way. And so we would be really not doing our collective jobs if we weren't thinking about how do we plan for this and how do we move forward while we have something to plan with, so that we aren't just reactionary cutting. Now's the time to think about the investment into other areas.
So one of the things thinking about that investment is, as the state pays a lesser and lesser portion of the cost of our institution, then it makes our student constituency more and more important from a revenue production perspective. That means that not only do we have to do a better job of growing and managing our enrollment, so that means recruiting more students who actually pay to come, making sure that they leave here, that they can we do the things we need to do so that they can graduate on time, and that keeps the debt load down. And there's so many integrated things, but it also means we have to think creatively about how can we do other kinds of things? How can we deliver instruction differently? How can we deliver instruction to a broader cross section? We can't just continue to depend upon our traditional look of students and do it the same way. So we have to think about that. And I think the other thing is I'm sitting here looking at Lynn and I'm thinking, we've always just said recruiting more students is admissions job. That's not my problem. That's their problem. Well, it's not really, because they're now the #1 source of revenue. It's everybody's problem. And if they leave and don't come back and don't pay and take their classes next semester, that's everybody's problem. So it's really all of our collective problems is what can we do to make sure that this is the first choice for people. And if it's the first choice, they're going to be willing to pay more of their money instead of wanting to be more incented to come. And so it's just all kinds of different ways. How can we use the university's resources more effectively for investment? How are we making sure that all the things that we're doing make sense? You're the people that are on the front line. You're the people who are going to have the good ideas. So I think we have to share them and talk amongst ourselves and say, hey, you know, have we thought about this, that, or the other? Maybe we have and it doesn't work. Or maybe we thought about it 10 years ago and it didn't work, and it might work this time because the world is different than it was 10 years ago. So just because we tried it once and it didn't work doesn't mean that we shouldn't reevaluate it, honestly reevaluate it to say, hey, it might work this time.
Well, that actually answers a lot of the second question that we had received, because the second question was, how does the projected cuts and budget discussions fit with the strategic plan? And can we cut faculty and staff and become a world-renowned public university? So I don't know if you had any more comments on that, or we want to move on to the next.
Well, I think when we think about everything being on the table, it's really everything is being on the table. And so if we have programs that are no longer relevant to our students today, if we have programs that we can't effectively compete in, if we've made investments because we thought it was a really good idea to invest money to do research in a particular area and it just didn't pay off, then we're going to have to look at pulling those resources back and finding another area that has great promise to invest in. So I think that the deans and the faculty are going through their own kind of programmatic review and soul searching to say, hey, if we're only going to have limited resources, where can we do the most good? Where can we do where's the biggest bang? Where can we really take our reputation up a notch? To me, some of the things that are going on here are so amazingly exciting. There's every day, it's just so fun to come to work because I'll bump into somebody who's doing research in a particular thing, or students who are studying about something. Or if you need a lift in your day, all you need to do is go over and tour the Student Design Center. There are some fascinating things going on over there and great enthusiasm. And so there's so many positive things going on here that we have to really not let ourselves just get bogged down in the negative. There's always going to be negative. And if you let it, it'll eat you alive. But there's so many positive things here. And so I think as our faculty go through their own kind of soul searching about focusing, where can they excel? Where can they be the best? That there's great opportunity in the non-traditional areas. It's where some of these disciplines that have been a little siloed in the past bump up to each other, and there's just great opportunity for brand new degree programs and brand new research. I mean, we are just setting poised in a wonderful place to be true leaders down the road, because we've got great chemistry and physics and other kinds of disciplines in the CASB area, and all of these wonderful in engineering and other kinds of technologies, and in computer science. And where those things come together, we have some faculty doing research that's just amazing. So I think we need to be focused on where can we invest money and be better and attract more students to pay the bills, as opposed to just always thinking about the downsides of having to cut. Because I think we have to do both.
Thank you. The next question that we had submitted was, how can departments justify reclassifications for managers and directors which result in up to $30,000 in additional pay when the underlings don't even receive a merit raise? This information is all available in the Blue Book, and there is a large discrepancies between the 15-16 book and the 17-18 book.
I don't really know how to speak to that. Those decisions are individual decisions. There should be a process for those have to go through multiple layers of a review. If those occur and they do go through multiple layers of review, they may be justified. I know on a faculty side and on some administrators perhaps, but especially on the faculty side, there are retention offers given when faculty have job offers from other institutions that the deans or the department chairs or the other faculty feel are appropriate to retain. That probably also is occurring in administrative positions. I would suspect that's mostly in faculty administrative positions. I personally am not aware of major administrative adjustments. I'm not saying that they haven't occurred. I've only been here since September. The chancellor hasn't been here much longer than that. We're trying to make sure that we tighten the processes. The president is also trying to make sure that processes are tightened. And for certain types of positions, job approval offers have to not only be approved on campus, they also have to be approved through the system. So we are trying to manage that. One of the things that I have learned after I came here, which was a bit eye-opening, is this. People have a tendency in this institution to kind of operate in a Wild West kind of way. It's somebody else figured that out. That's amazing. It's just very interesting, and there's very much an attitude of, well, I'll do whatever I want to do, and then we'll see if somebody calls me on it or not. We're trying to change the culture a bit on that to say there are rules. We expect everybody to follow the rules, not just other people. But it's a cultural thing, and it's slow, but I think we're making progress. Our goal is that rules are there for a reason. That doesn't mean that sometimes there aren't exceptions to those rules, but the exceptions to rules have to go through the appropriate steps and get the appropriate sign-offs so that people can be responsible for those decisions. So I'm not saying that hasn't occurred, but I'm saying that we're trying to watch very closely to make sure that anything that like that occurs in the future is well documented, and we can be very transparent about it.
And the other part of that is you have heard there will be merit increases. And that's, merit. Everybody will be eligible for merit, but because they're merit, there is an expectation that that range will start at 0. Because it's merit and not market adjustment, not cost of living.
We did, by the way, at one time put a proposal together that we thought might be easier for people to understand that it was a merit pool if we had a cost of living pool. And we would say, this is a cost of living pool. Everybody gets this. This is a merit pool. Not everybody gets this. We were completely shut down on that. Yep. The president feels very, very strongly that if you are not performing in a meritorious way, then you should look for some other occupation. That everybody should be coming and performing in a very meritorious way, but that not everybody does. But that's the expectation. Everybody comes and gives it their best. And if you're not giving it your best, then you should look for something else. There is no entitlement. And he does not believe in cost of living increases when there are very productive people who are very underpaid. So we did try for that. I personally believe that it's been a while since we've had any increases. I was very much pushing that there would be a small cost of living pool, and then we would have a separate merit pool. I lost.
And we did do an adjustment this past year to some of the lowest paid employees on the campus.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is regarding the merit raises. So how is that going to be determined? How are you going to determine what the merit raises are going to be and what process will go into that?
So the question was, what is the merit pool going to look like and the process to determine those merit raises?
We don't know yet because there are rumors that system is going to be very directive. The chancellor and I have very definite thoughts on that, but I don't know whether that decision hasn't been completely made. It's still in negotiation.
And it's the same question for the faculty as well. And have exactly the same question in terms of, what's merit and how are we going to assess what merit is here?
So my second part of that question is, so the, my performance evaluation that we all just went through last week or whatever, will that have any bearing on the merit rates? Because there's so much subjectivity in that and how different leaders and managers and supervisors ask their staff to do that and how they ask them to complete that. And I'm not sure that that's exactly a fair process because everybody's expected to do it in different ways. Some are asked just to go in and fill in the dots and be done, where others are asked to justify why through goals and outcomes and all of these different things through a book of information in the comments. And it's just not very equal. So I'm wondering if that will have any time to that. Sorry, John. I know it's long.
Okay, so you've got that verbatim, John.
I'll paraphrase. So the question is how is my performance going to be utilized in determining merit raise, especially with the differences across campus on how different managers and departments have used it and felt it out and completed it?
Okay, so let me take a stab at that and then I'll let the chancellor follow up on that. So from my perspective, my performance, the tool itself is not an ideal tool. However, it's what we've been told that we will use. We pushed back and say, can we tweak that some, make it more user-friendly, make it slightly different? And we were told, no, not now. What I've also encouraged or tried to encourage through HR and through, if any of you've been to supervisory training through them recently, is that we really have to change the way we use our performance evaluation tool. We need to be thoughtful about that, and we need to really document fairly what staff are doing well and what staff are not doing well. Because otherwise, how can anybody improve if you don't know why you're not doing well? I mean, it's just, to me, a no-brainer. So we've been encouraging people to write and to use it as an honest tool to improve staff performance, both from a common understanding of where we are. You know, as a manager, it's always quite enlightening to me, the self-evaluation parts. If somebody says to me, I'm perfect in everything, and I'm thinking, whoa, obviously I have not done a good job in communicating if you think you do everything excellently. Because very few of us, including myself, do everything excellently. Chris may think I do nothing excellently, I don't know. But I'm gonna find out. It is a great place for a conversation, because if the staff truly do that, and as a manager, that's not your perception of the world, then it's a great place for a communication, because really what performance appraisals are about is making sure that we improve communication between supervisors and staff. We clearly identify what expectations of performance are. We clearly identify how you're doing against that and where you need improvement. So from that perspective, I'm encouraging everyone to be honest. I hope that we will not be given a mandatory matrix that says this is how we're going to allocate raises. I don't think that that is appropriate, and I think it removes control from the manager and from the administration. At the same time, I have told my HR staff that if we get departments who rate everyone outstanding, that there's going to be pushback. And so I'm going to have to be convinced in writing exactly why everybody in this department is outstanding. So we're going to document what's really occurring to the best of our ability. Will it be perfect? No, it won't. But I'm hoping it's the beginning of a journey. So the second part of that question is, if the chancellor and I get our preference, then the money would be allocated down through the administrative organization, and it would be up to departments to determine how that money should be best allocated to reward the performance of staff within their own areas. One of the things I have said is, if there is a department that all the performance evaluations are outstanding, they will be asked to not only write up exactly why, but then to rank those outstanding employees from 1 to however many there are. So at least we know within the outstanding group how they rank against one another. So it will be an interesting journey. But I do believe that it should be fair and equitable, and it's all about communicating with staff appropriately. Yes, Steve?
I'm the director of sponsored programs, and all of the staff, with the exception of one, do the same job. So using what you said, the pushback would be, if they were rated the same, HR would ask me then to rate them 1 through whatever as who is the highest. How would HR be able then to evaluate my evaluation, who sit with those staff daily, watch that work, know what work they are doing is truly accurate?
I'm not going to ask HR to do that. I'm going to ask the manager to do that.
So to reiterate the question for those on Zoom, the question is how will the managers and what they're communicating with the HR evaluations be able to have a accurate representation with HR on ranking those employees if they're in the same categories?
But I thought I heard you say you would ask HR to push back to that manager that they would need to rate. My question is, how does HR understand what's happening in individual departments when that's not the job they do? Me, I give an evaluation, I give a rating, I justify that rating, why it is expected, exceeds expectations, or perhaps needs improvement. That's my question. Because perhaps with a staff that has been doing the job for several years, most staff in that office would be rated very similarly. At least that's my hope, because we've got a bigger problem if they're not.
Did you want to?
So the question was, how does HR work with departments when they have similar rankings on the review, and how that works in the overall merit pool? And is that correct?
Yeah. The other thing you heard was that you would have a justification for those rankings, which you just said you would do. And I appreciate that there may be a lot of very similar rankings within a given department. So that means that if you have really high flyers and you're assuming that they are very similar to those who are performing at a lesser but similar but not identical level, that the differential in merit increase is going to be really small. And you live with that. I'm a kind of options and consequences kind of person. If you have the authority to do things, you also will end up living with the responsibility of those decisions.
I was just afraid I was hearing that HR would be driving those decisions more so than what I believe as the manager of those staff and that unit would necessarily be able to do in a valuable manner.
So the question was the concern that HR would be driving the performance evaluation process more than the departments and their input from the department on how that department has performed.
So my instruction to HR has been to do a data analysis, a statistical analysis. So if there are departments that rate every single person in their division at the very top level, everybody in this department is at the very top, then to me, that's an outlier. If everybody in the department needs improvement, that's also an outlier. I want to understand where the outliers are, and I want additional documentation about those things. If everyone in the department is an outstanding and it's been documented, then there'll be additional documentation requests perhaps, and then you may have to rank them just so that we have that information. We are not going to rank your employees. No, nobody in HR or myself wants the job or has that knowledge. No, we're just going to make sure that the data that's in our systems is complete and accurate to the best of our ability. But we'll be doing those audits purely from a statistical perspective, not from an individual kind of a perspective.
Yeah, and you sort of try to get a feeling for, just by reading some of the justifications. If somebody's, they've been here 15 years, they come in, they do their job every day. For some managers, that's like needs improvement, right? And they would say that. So we would, again, take a look at that. For other managers, that's meritorious. The answer is it's neither.
Well, kind of following up on that topic, another staff had submitted a question which states, as you consider pay equity, what are you doing to ensure gender equity? There are specific examples of pay inequality for the same job and title, which men make significantly more than women. This is a sunshine state. We can see and compare salaries.
Do you want to take that? Or you can take it.
Let me go. That's a national problem, and it's one that we are committed to addressing, but we're going to have to do this longer term and more strategically. That's all I can promise you with that. I'm committed to pay equity. I'm committed to making sure that people are rewarded for the jobs that they do. And a lot of this is rooted in when people first came on board 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. And it really hasn't, the percentage increases have just basically exacerbated some of those differences at times. But we look really hard at who's in the job, what are they doing, how are they doing it, and really try hard to make sure that there will be gender equity related to pay. It is a problem in faculty nationally, and there's been study after study. The gap is closing, it's not closed, and it's not closing fast enough.
But we have huge equity problems, not only across gender, but just across performance based upon how long someone's been in the job. We talk about salary compression in faculty, and it's an issue on our campus. It's an issue nationally, but in our state, we have huge we have huge salary compression across some of our staff lines as well. So as we look at things title by title, as new hires are made, we always, HR is now doing an analysis when new hires are made to see how they fit and what are the other people in those titles. And as we can make adjustments, we are trying to do that. But I can tell you, it's a very expensive problem. So it's not going to be fixed overnight, but we are trying to look at that and trying to fix inequities as we have the money and as we find them. We're starting with the ones that are the most grossly done, but it's a slow, tedious process.
Thank you. The next question we had submitted was, although vested employees receive a 75% discount on tuition for our dependents, many of us still cannot afford to send our children to S&T. Would the system be willing to consider waiving tuition for vested employee dependents, or perhaps be willing to implement a need-based waiver on a case-by-case basis?
This is a system-wide policy, and I believe it's one that is currently under review for modifications, but I'm not on that group. Do we have a member of the track committee here? I believe they're looking at going to a 3-year vestment instead of a 5-year vestment.
They're going to shorten it, and I don't remember how long it is, but it's going to be short.
Actually,
1-year
it's gone-
vestment?
I thought it was
approved 1 year.
1.
Oh, it already did?
For dependents.
Yeah.
For dependents.
For
Was
dependents.
this about spouses? Well, no, spouses and
This is-
dependents is the same.
Well, so I think it's a combination of questions. The vested, it's actually 6 months for employees to get 75%. Dependents is 50% at 1 year.
Okay.
And this is, it's going to be implemented system-wide. It's just a question of how the system is going to look at this. I would certainly, from the standpoint of what the system is trying to do, to help people who have the financial challenges of getting their family to go to college. I mean, it's sort of disingenuous of us to be in the education business and not try to promote education of our own employees and their families. So I would lobby pretty hard for, at the very least, a need-based set of waivers or additional discounts graduated based on general compensation, family size, cost of living, all of these other things. So I think it's a great idea, and we should look at it. And I appreciate whoever asked that. That's actually a really good idea.
But it is one that will have to be done system-wide. They won't allow us to do that on a campus-by-campus basis. Because that's all funded from the flat rate benefit, is where the money comes to fund that.
On a campus level, we did submit the new application for staff and the scholarship that Staff Council has available. So any staff that are wanting to take classes in the system, the application is now available on the website and has a June 15th deadline. So I did want to plug that as well.
And when we have, by the way, a shout out for Staff Day, which often will entail recognition of additional raising funds of the Staff Council scholarships that are done. It's really cool and really much appreciated.
Well, that is everything that we've had. Oh, yes.
Do we have the updated application for our dependents that will come to school next year?
I'm not sure.
Repeat the question.
Well, application for dependents.
My son will be going to school next year, and I know I have to fill out an application.
The applications for dependents should be on the system webpage. There should be posted there all the time. The system does that, so. I will send a note that they need to get their next ones here. One of the things that I learned after I came here was brought to my attention by faculty. The policy says that if you have a dependent here, that you have to submit that form every semester. The practice on this campus, I've learned, is that sometimes HR will do that on your behalf. But the policy is that you have to do that every year. So I would encourage you to do that every year, because if something happens to fall through the crack and you just counted on somebody doing your responsibility
Every semester.
every semester. So you should really make sure that you take the initiative to do that. So then you know it is done, because it's real money, and trying to go back after the fact is prohibited by the university CRRs. So even though HR has been doing that often on your behalf, I would encourage everyone to make sure that you take the initiative. It's a lot of money. So you take the initiative to make sure that you submit it and it's all done, and then there can be no gotchas.
Well, that was everything we've had submitted either online or in person. If there was nothing else that people wanted to submit, we can open up to open mic, and feel free to come up. We'll have the mic set up here on the stand so that anybody on Zoom can also hear the questions that are being submitted, and we'll be glad to continue answering questions that you have.
That's a sensitive mic.
Let's open mic. Anybody has anything else?
I'll be first.
Thank you. Somebody's got to be first.
This is a follow-up to one of the original first questions. Was the number of layoffs, has that number been determined yet, and do we know how many layoffs there will be?
No.
Can you define a layoff? Define the word layoff, as in, if I'm laid off today, how long does that last? What happens? What's the process?
Okay, so I'm going to give this a shot. And any HR people in the audience, if I say something wrong, should stand up and correct me, because it's not my area of expertise. So a layoff is when a position is eliminated, and that is a termination for the employee, but the job cannot be refilled within the next year.
Two typically is what.
I think our policy says.
One is definite, but there's
Yeah.
a tendency to wait at least two.
Right.
Okay.
So one is, I think, legally in our CRRs, two is our practice.
Okay. And is there going to be a severance package offered to those who are laid off, terminated?
There is a severance package on the university's books. It is a system-wide package, and this is where I'm going to get really on thin ice, but I believe that it is, you get 1 week of pay for every year of service, up to a maximum of 26 weeks.
Okay.
See, I knew that there were people who knew the answers to
Yes.
the questions. So it's my understanding that during that period of transition, that if you find another job on any of the University of Missouri campuses, then your benefits continue. So you would have benefits during that period of transition, and if you find another job during that period, then there is no break in service.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Grab the mic, and that way you can just stand and read it. We're going to an online question for our online people.
This was a question is, during the last Board of Curators meeting, there was mention of some changes to the administrative services in finance, HR, and IT based on the results of the survey. What are possible changes to administrative services, especially in finance?
So this is a project that is going to be ongoing, and it'll start this in the coming year, and it will go, my guess is, multiple years. So from the results of the survey, what we found was pretty much reinforcement of areas where we already knew that things weren't working as well as possible. One of the things on the finance in particular, since it was directed at finance, is that over half of the FTEs across the system who do finance work actually report up through the finance organization. So less than half of the FTEs report up through the finance organization. Of the people who do finance work across the system that are decentralized, most of them spend less than 25%, 80-some% of the people, the individual people, spend less than 25% of their time doing finance work. So what that means is we have an awful lot of generalists as opposed to specialists doing a lot of finance things. So one of the things that we will work to identify is how can we rearrange and change the work so that we can move our employees to more specialist types of activities and make them less generalist. There's two major positive things from that. One is that it allows people to specialize in the things where they are the most talented and they enjoy the most. And two is it allows them to be more productive in everything else that they do. Now, because such a large amount of these FTEs are dispersed across a large number of people, it's going to be very difficult to take cost out, especially in the short run. However, if we have someone who's spending 2/3 of their time really in academic support activities for a department, then maybe we can rearrange the work so they can focus more on those kinds of activities, so a much greater part of their day on those academic support things and less of their day doing finance things. How we do that, we don't know yet. Another one of the key things is that what we learned from the survey is that some of our centralized processes are broken. One of those is procure to pay. We spend an enormous amount of time and money purchasing products. So one of the things that's going to be evaluated, the very first, is how can we improve both the front end and the back end of the whole procure to pay process. If we can get that one right, we can release a lot of people's time and effort to do things that they would much prefer to do other than spending time on procure to pay. So much of the initial focus will be on those big kinds of things, because if we can't figure out how to do centralized processes better, then there's no need at looking at doing more centralized processes. So the first focus will be on that and similar kinds of things. Where are there things that we can fix, use more common rules, more common policies, so we can use automation to do a lot of the work that today has to be done individually by people because everybody has their own process and their own policy. So first look at standardizing policies and practices and improving both the front end and the back end of some of these processes. So what we would anticipate is for the things that will happen, especially within the finance area, it's not a single approach for everything, and it will be a tiered approach. It will be both a top-down and a bottom-up solution to these, because they won't work if we just do them top-down. They won't work if we just do them bottom-up. We have to have both pushing some things like the policies, the standardized, this is the way we're going to do business, have to come from the top down. But how then we implement those and make sure that they work for the frontline users has to come from the bottom up. And so it will be it'll be a lot of work for a lot of people, because there's going to be a lot of people asked to serve on task force for all kinds of different things to say. If we're going to improve this process that you touch, we need to know what will make it better, what's broken. So it's not going to be a fast thing. It's not going to be somebody deciding in a dark room how we're going to solve these problems. Now, there's going to be some priority of which things we're going to look at first. But after we kind of look at those things, it's going to be a lot of input from people on how do we actually identify and solve some of those problems.
And that bottom-up process is where we need your help. You're the ones doing this. You know what things are clunky, where there are bottlenecks, where there are impediments, where things can be done better.
But it also means that it's going to be more work in the short run for longer term gain. But again, it's that strategic look. It's not about how do we change it just today, but how do we do things today that's going to make tomorrow much better.
All right, another question from online says, why does the process for requested construction changes in a building take so long and cost so much? Has this process been reviewed to determine if construction projects are done in the most economical and efficient ways?
So the reason that projects take so long is because we are shorthanded and we have so many things that have to happen, and also because we do have limits on space and we're forced to use our space as effectively as possible. There's a great deal of domino effect. And so if a decision is made to move one group from one place to another, then another group, they have to get out before we can move the next group. And so there's a lot of domino. We have reviewed our processes, and we are continuing to review our processes and make improvements. We've found areas for improvement, and we're going to make those improvements. We continually are looking at a lot of things. One of the things that we're looking at is how to communicate a lot better with regard to timelines and expectations and what's going on. And so we'll be doing that. Another thing is that from a cost perspective, what many people think about when they're evaluating cost is what it costs me to do it on my own house. And the university lives under a very different set of rules, both from a liability perspective and from a time and money and how long something is supposed to last. People think, just if we take a very simple thing, people think, well, I just want to paint my office. I could do it myself. Well, you know, we're considering whether or not we're going to allow people to just do it themselves. But the thing is, you can't just go by whatever paint you want to do it, because the university has certain standards that they have to use. So if we were to move to a process where maybe we would say, it's okay if you want to paint your office, still you would have to look at, well, you have to buy this kind of paint, and it's going to cost more than what you would just buy at Walmart. And it has to be from this type of color palettes, because the next person in your office might not like pink and purple. So there will be some constraints. But yes, we are looking at evaluating all of those different kinds of processes, and to make sure that we understand and can communicate clearly and openly what the policies are and why we have the ones that we do, why we can change some things and why we can't change other things. But we're under a major review of those things now.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like you may have answered this question before, but I was curious, for the people who have, due to strategic realignment, have found themselves laid off, is there any effort to make sure that, they got laid off because of strategic realignment, not because of any fault of, poor performance? Has there been any effort to try to take some of them and put them in other places in the organization that are currently hiring?
Yeah, and I'm going to let the HR people help me keep me straight on this. What we do is that we try to make sure that anybody that is in that position, make sure that they have access and that they're notified of jobs that they may be qualified for, that they can apply for. And that goes across the entire system. So if there's not what's legally a deemed preferential hiring except within a department. But outside of the department, what we try to do is make sure that those people have the knowledge and the opportunity to compete for any job that they might be interested in applying in. And that goes across the entire system. So that's what we try to do, is to work with them to say, hey, these are opportunities that you might be interested in applying for elsewhere that are open.
Well, if we have nothing else, we'll wrap up.
Before we wrap up, let me just say thank you to all of you who are here for doing this. And staff, could I get the staff council to stand, please? Because the staff council has really done a lot of this work for you. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize what they're doing on your behalf collectively. I feel like there's an awful lot of communication up and down the line. Yes.
I just got a question.
There's a mic.
Come on down. Oh, now we're too tall. We are not only a campus that the Wild West and shoots from the hip, but we're also a campus that talks a lot. So there's lots of rumors. And one of the rumors going around campus, and has been for quite some time, pertains to office-sponsored programs. Mm-hmm. There is a rumor that office-sponsored programs has heard that consolidation, centralization of OSP functions could be moved under the umbrella of our Columbia sister campus. Do either of you know the validity of that rumor? Or
so first and foremost, lots of feedback here. First and foremost, as we have said, everything is being looked at. Everything. It's utterly disingenuous to just put things aside and say, no, that's not worth talking about. That's not worth looking at. Everything is going to be looked at. You know, whether I'm called a vice president to report to a president of a system, everything is going to be looked at every level. And so any sort of investigation, look at, check to see how we can do things differently. We have to do things differently. Let me remind you, there's about $160 million delta that the system has to close over the next 3 or 4 years, based on funding coming in, based on tuition caps, based on projected enrollments. $160 million delta. So everything's going to be looked at. If it makes sense to move things, things might move. If it doesn't make sense, they probably won't move. Anything that it doesn't make sense to move would certainly be able to withstand that kind of look-see in a data-driven investigation. So I spend a reasonable amount of time trying to put out rumor mill fires that are just rumor. And that's the reason, you're seeing us be both careful and I hope pretty clear that there aren't major decisions that have been made yet. I got how many layoffs are going to be and where they go. They haven't been decided. And they can't be decided in the absence of real data and real information. So you have my promise, you have Cuba's promise that this is going to be as data-driven a process as is entirely possible, with the goal that we all have here of serving our students to the absolute best of our ability to serve our students. That's why we're here.
Can I ask one more?
As you look at possible consolidation of services, and I have to say, I'm trying to get a person back up to speed to do purchasing in HR. It takes forever to get through that training, and I'm not being critical. It just is what it is. As you look at possible consolidation, is there talk of at least having centers on campus? Because my experience has been once something goes north, we're number 4 on the priority list. So is that a possibility?
There's a lot of discussion about distributed centers of excellence and expertise. So
On our campus?
On all the campuses, distributed, okay, not just Columbia, but our campus, UMKC, UMSL, that, there are places that some of these groups do things better than others potentially. And if there is consolidation, and that sentence begins with if, then that's part of the look as well.
And so from the administrative systems perspective on that, they're really looking at what kinds of things fit the shared services model, and that is things that are very transactional in nature. And then they're looking, and where those shared services occur, there have been no decisions made. And my guess is it will be a myriad of different kinds of things. But when they're looking at the term, just so you know, because things will start hitting the press, when you see or hear the term shared services, think at least with the finance and HR side, it's back office processing. It's transactional related. There's a group of things that are called centers of excellence or centers of expertise. And those are things that may be done just at the system office. And an example of that is Treasury. We only have Treasury functions at the system, and they do it for everybody. Risk and insurance management is done at the system office. That's a center of excellence. We need very, very specific knowledge, but they can do it for everybody. We'll also have centers of excellence in finance and HR that will be at the campus level. And we will have centers of excellence that may even be at the dean's level or at the college level. So, and we may, I'm sure that we will have some things where maybe on our campus, because of our size, we'll have it at the campus level, but MU may have it at the dean's level, or some colleges may have it, and then other colleges will have like a combined one or whatever. St. Louis has already moved to that model in some things, where some of their larger colleges have it at the college, and their other colleges, actually Kansas City, and their other colleges are being brought in centrally to provide those same services. St. Louis is looking at a much more centralized model, but it's on the campus. And so and again, part of it is just about nature of work, so that and moving from this generalist kind of approach to a more specialist kind of approach. And the reason is because there are a lot of tasks that a department may only do once a year, twice a year, and they're complicated. And so people get their book down and they read through step by step and they do it right, and they, no problems, except that it takes a long time to relearn it every 6 months. So if we could organize the work differently, where you've got one person that's what they do all the time, then the person on the front line could just send it and say, we want X to happen. And then that person could make it happen. They could pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm sending you this because, and then they can do it fast. So it's not just all about being taken over, but it's about looking at how we do work differently, so we don't have to spend so much time in retraining and retooling, because that's where a lot of the inefficiencies come.
All right, it's kind of actually a clarification on something you said earlier. Earlier, I think you said that we're $5 million in the hole, as it were, for 2019. Is that right?
That is our budget deficit based upon our planning estimate of all of the pluses and minuses on the revenue side and the increases in cost on our expenditure side. Okay. So it'll take $5 million in either additional revenue or reduced cost to bring that budget into balance, which is what we have to do by June when we take that to the Board of Curators.
And bearing in mind that that a little over $2 million of that is related to salary.
Right.
Increases.
Yeah, and so I just want to make sure, because it was kind of said together but not directly, is that taking into consideration the governor's recommendation, or taking into consideration what the appropriations rumor is?
Yeah, that's based upon the governor's recommendation, because we take a conservative approach in our long-term planning. Okay. If we wind up with more than that, then we will use the additional money on a one-time basis, so for one-time investments, and then we'll build that into our next year's base as far from a budget planning perspective as additional revenue.
Okay, thank you.
And again, one of the reasons we're taking that conservative approach is you can think of us as 3/4 salary. And if we get to the almost end of a fiscal year, and we have spent, like we've got that money coming in, and all of a sudden we have to take money that could have been spread out over that year, out of the very end of the year kinds of things, then it is really painful. It is really bad, because there's almost no flexibility at that point. I mean, then you start affecting people dramatically and instantly.
I have a comment.
So our group was talking, you were talking about the one-offs that may happen once every 6 months. I don't feel that the survey that we did captured all of that information. What's the process going to be that you can go back and capture the one-offs that each department may do for your centralized person to pick those up and move forward to make things more efficient?
So what the survey actually did was just give us some directional kinds of things. It told us roughly where the processes were the most distributed, or where people viewed that they were spending the bulk of their time. And I realized that if you really followed the instructions, and it said, if you're spending less than 5% of your time doing something, then don't report it. There's a lot of that. But we know that that's there. So we take that into consideration in all of our planning. And so we won't be looking at that survey data to say, oh, well, this many people in this area did this and they shouldn't be doing that. What we will be looking at that, though, is to look at, as we begin to think about what are the possibilities and the opportunities for organizing work, where do we start? Where do we go and bring a group together and say, hey, it looks like this is an area where we could do things better. You know, so let's talk about what maybe some possibilities might be.
So is the assumption correct that this might be something department level that they would go through and try to gather that data?
I think it'll be more campus-wide. We'll look at it from a campus perspective on different kinds of things as we begin to look at different kinds of processes. And so it's not going to happen really fast. We're looking at this as, you know, we'll try to start with some things, but it may take us 3 years to look at all the processes and all the different things. I think the one that they've determined has the biggest return, and this is not just from the Administrative Systems Survey, it's also from the Voice of the Customer survey that also happened, because what was interesting about those two is that the things that, if you looked at the high-level data on the Administrative Systems Survey, where we're spending a time, especially distributed time, and then you looked at the Voice of the Customer about what they didn't like about things, there was a lot of correlation there. So they really reinforced one another that directionally, here's the areas that we need to work on first. And the procure to pay one was the one that was at the top that's obviously broken, that needs to be fixed. And it's also one where we've tried to centralize it in the past. And what happened is that we just kind of threw this together, and the people on one end said, this works, and the front end users said, this doesn't work. And nobody ever got together to fix it. So that's, I think the idea maybe that's a tough one. We know that's a really hard one, but it's really broken, and so we need to try to fix it. If we can win that battle, if we can fix that broken process, then we can learn a lot of things that we can apply to maybe other processes that will help us improve the next thing. Okay, does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Okay, appreciate it.
To follow up on that, I'm on being as part of the advisory committee for the activities analysis. We've had a meeting. The report will be coming out shortly. I think they're hoping it will be out next week in the short form. They're also identifying data. We've run around on the title, but basically people on each campus that will be getting the data to be able to kind of help them in their individual areas, and basically data owners that the advisory committee was working to have them help identify those areas that they can improve on those processes, but also setting up metrics to assess how that progress is being dealt over over a course of several years. And that since the survey has been designed, drafted, and it could be available if people wanted to use that later on to see has that been effective in addressing those issues and processes, and that could be done at a department level, that could be done, they weren't thinking about system level because everybody knows how much that survey was, how fun that survey was. But that it could be available if they wanted to use that in the future, 3, 4, 5 years down the road to see, so this was a snapshot in time, how have we changed? Have we made progress? Have we actually addressed the issues that this was helping us identify? So it could be available in the future for that as well. If there are no other, go for it.
You just want the last word.
No, I'm actually stalling so everyone else can come up with better questions. I heard a lot of talk about being data-driven, which I personally am an IT person, so I like that idea. But I was kind of curious. It sounds like a lot of the data that you're getting and analyzing are done at department levels as opposed to kind of as a university overarching approach. Is that a fair assessment, or is there actually like entities within the university that are taking maybe a larger view that, you know, a single campus or a single department may not have access to the data?
I think it all depends on the function and the things. And you have to remember this, we've just started. There's a huge amount of things to do, and we're all have lots of work in our day jobs. So we're going to have to piecemeal this out over a period of time. And none of those decisions have been made. So I think they're going to look first at what are the processes that impact the most people across the entire system, because the idea is if we can fix those processes and make improvements there, then the return on that work is going to be significantly more. And again, I have not seen any of the data on the IT or the HR side, and so I've not been involved with those, so I don't know how those are going. But the same framework is being used is to look at kind of these different buckets to say what things are transactionally driven, because just logically, if it's purely transaction, more back office things, if we can write common rules, common policies, and we can automate and we can really specialize in those, then that would appear to be where the biggest bang for the buck is for return. And then really looking at the centers of excellence, which ones, most of the ones in that area, if they're going to be a system-wide one, they already exist. So it's just a matter of improving that. But how do we look at it on our campus to say, these are the kinds of things, maybe in IT, these are the kinds of things that are really highly skilled and we don't use them very often. Maybe that should be across the system, a center of excellence, somewhere, someplace, whoever's got the biggest expertise, maybe here. Or it may be something where we say on a campus, this is a center where we need face-to-face time with our employees, like in HR. We need people who are on the ground, who know the answers, who can help people make day-to-day decisions. That doesn't make any sense to take it off. You know, things that have direct customer interaction, those need to be here on the campus somewhere. And how we organize them on the campus, I suspect we'll have lots of different ways depending upon what it is. I will tell you, we're more centralized on a lot of the key processes than some of the other campuses are. They're moving toward more of that, or to these centers, whether it's at the campus level or in different spots on the campus. But it's all going to be about how can we do the work better and just creating more specialists as opposed to generalists, and also trying to do it in such a way that there's more opportunity for people to have a career ladder in the organization so that you can have these different experiences and be able to move up into higher paying jobs, or jobs of more responsibility, or jobs with more expertise. So it's not, especially on the HR side, I know some of their key things that I saw for the first time yesterday was about, as we look at work, so as finance looks at what makes sense on how to do work better, are we doing that from the HR perspective? Are we doing that in a way that allows our employees to build their skill development and to move from place to place and create career ladders in the organization? Because we've done a really bad job at that in the past. And so are there ways that we can do that either within our campus or within the system, where we might be, where people have the opportunity to move, in different things across the system? So those will be things that HR will be looking at on career development, is as we go through these things, then let's not just look at it myopically from one viewpoint, but let's look at it from multiple viewpoints. I would say the same thing is there's going to be some hard questions on IT, because the system office is going to look at it from what they do the most, which is their main administrative functions. And they're going to want to say, these are transactionally based. They should all be done exactly the same. And maybe they should. We need to look at that. But here in our IT, which I've been educated on since I've been here, we do an awful lot of things that don't have anything to do with those. I mean, a huge amount of the work that our IT group does is in promoting instruction and in research and all kinds of academic things and all kinds of things with our students. And because we have such technical equipment in the research, being aware of all of those kinds of things and making sure all of those things work together. So those things may or may not make any sense at all to move off. So I think it's being able to make sure that we're asking the right questions and making sure that we're looking at things from a lot of different directions. We're not a one-size-fits-all. We are a people service-driven industry. So the things that PwC may say work for the most of the norm may not work for us, because we're not cookie cutter. But we should still be able to ask ourselves the same questions. And then we should be able to take the answers to those questions and make decisions that are the best for the university. So that's my hope or my goal.
Got another online question. I'm going to keep this away from there. Who was asked to perform the satisfaction survey? Like what groups people were invited to participate in that?
Do you know the answer to that, John, how that was done?
So the Voice of the Consumer survey was selected for a smaller population on campus. Staff council was part of that population, and they had other demographics that they also targeted to get that voice of the consumer. So that was sent out to all of, I know the council members all received it and we submitted and got feedback from other people if we didn't feel comfortable answering specifically for certain areas. So I do know council was involved in part of that, and then they had other groups on campus that had been part of, maybe identified in the activities analysis as another population that they sent that survey out, that Voice of the Consumer survey.
So you've mentioned the research equipment earlier. I was curious about a lot of the departments that have the various technical research equipment are faced with supporting increasingly aging equipment. Is there any consideration for either providing funding or providing a, I guess, different budgetary carryover mechanism to have a larger purchase to replace some of that equipment? Some of the equipment that comes to mind is electron microscopes and liquid chromatographs that seem to multiply at night recently. And many of them are very old and are very large investments. I was wondering if we had any consideration for that.
The deans and I have had conversations about tackling this issue. It's a multifaceted issue because we have, number one, these things take up a lot of space, and space is an expensive commodity. Faculty don't like to throw things away, even if only a portion of it are broken, because, you know, they could probably use it for parts to fix the other one. I swear I've heard this. So it's a very large question. And I think it's one that we are going to have a lot of dialogue on in the coming year. The deans are aware of it, and it's something that we need to have some longer term plans with regard to. It's another one of those areas where I think we've got to the point where we cannot continue the way we've always done it in the past, and it's going to be some difficult conversations for people about that, because nobody likes to let go of something, even if I only used it 6 months ago or 9 months ago, and now I want to use it. And
in 2014.
Yeah, and now I want to use it and it doesn't work, and somebody needs to come and fix it. And the fact that the software that's on it is outdated and we don't even have anymore, or we're having to try to coax this CPU along that's 4 generations old because it's the only one that'll talk to the proprietary software on the piece of equipment. Yeah, we have some issues we're going to have to deal with. They won't be clean, but there'll be healthy conversations. And yes, and we need longer term plans. One of the things in our planning process that we are embarking in multiple areas is not just looking at our operational kinds of planning on a 1-year basis, but looking at 5-year plans. So we've always done a 5-year capital plan, but one of the things that we're working on with Ted is to look at a 5-year plan for our operating maintenance money to say, what are the projects that are going to be done over the next 5 years? We're looking at parking. What are the projects that need to be done over the next 5 years? We need to look at major equipment purchases. What are the different things that need to be replaced? How do we get things that are obsolete away? to make space, because right now we wouldn't even have space to put new things because we have to get rid of the old things. So, and at what point should those things be replaced? And do we have grants in line that could be used to help offset some of those costs? So it's a very valid question, and it's one that is timely. And I think it's one that we'll be having some discussions on how do we do this, not just in 1 year, but how do we put together a 5-year plan to address some of these things?
Overprinted with the academic strategic plan of where we are going, where we're going for research, where we're going for the educational component, where we're going, what are the hot things coming along. And it could be that we don't just replace some of that equipment, that we actually head off in some new directions, because it's, what needs to occur for us to move the needle to solve society's greatest problems. We are at a remarkable university to have the ability to actually look out and try to solve some of society's problems.
And this is another area where we absolutely cannot centralize those functions, because we have to have people face-to-face, online, fixing all of those strange and unique things that the people at the system office who are worried about administrative big processes, transactional processes, don't even understand that that part's going on. So that's part of the dialogue. Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank you all for coming out and for being part of these open forums and promoting this dialogue. As I mentioned, we will have the recording of this available later for those if you wanted to come back and see what had been discussed, if you'd missed something, or if anybody else who wasn't able to get here would also be able to be part of the dialogue and hear what was discussed today. Just one more plug, there are some refreshments in the back, so please do not feel shy about taking stuff to go, and we look forward to having these continue in the future, and appreciate all of your engagement today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're out in front. See you.